Okay. So this is one that we had planned for a while because I really wanted to talk about the Squid and the Whale, but I was having trouble getting a copy of Kramer vs. Kramer, and then one just fell right into my lap. Nice.
So this is only a month late.
It's not even borrowed. This is actually mine. I mean, it almost literally just fell in my lap for $2.50, but still, that's pretty cheap, especially for a Best Picture winner.
Yeah.
As most people hiss when they think about Apocalypse Now, but
it's coming. Don't worry.
Or those two fans of Breaking Away. So we may not go into that as well. What was the comment? Reviewing Kramer vs. Kramer before Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And I'm throwing one more rolling into this ladder just to fuck with that guy. I'm sorry. I had to.
He's a great viewer. Everyone knows that.
It's coming. Apocalypse Now is coming.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
We've been playing that one for a while, too. So.
And if not 2 weeks... The plan is to do it in 2 weeks, but if something falls through, it'll possibly be next week. I'm being very revealing right now. Not mentioning the other one is what's keeping it secret.
You're basically flipping the next 2 weeks if you absolutely have to, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, we're gonna start with Kramer vs. Kramer.
Okay.
I had to think for a second, because this is not planned. I guess we'll go ahead and start with that real quick. One of the things that Kramer vs. Kramer is known for is some people think it's kind of, considering its steep competition, a bit of a lackluster Best Picture winner. Not only that, but it also took director, actor, supporting actors, and screenplay. Which is quite a haul. And it got 2 more acting nominations with Justin Henry and Jane Alexander, who's like the family friend. And yeah, overall, I mean, I am, a big fan of Apocalypse Now, a huge fan of all that jazz. But the Kramer vs. Kramer victory is never something... It's not a movie I'm, really passionate about, but it's just, for some reason, it's just not a win that bothers me. I mean, I'm okay with it. It's fine.
It's just there.
It's like the King's Speech of its time. It gets way too much hatred just because it won against a movie that's going to be considered a masterpiece.
Of course.
But I think that's kind of tainted its reputation a little bit. I love that the public is all, the Oscars don't matter to me. That's just a Hollywood circle jerk, and the awards don't mean anything because the good movies never win. But then every time, you bring up a movie like Kramer vs. Kramer, The King's Speech, suddenly Oscars banner like, oh, that movie sucks because it beat Apocalypse Now or The Social Network. But, you know how I feel. I would suck Aaron Sorkin's dick all day because he wrote The Social Network. But The King's Speech victory doesn't bother me because it's a really good movie anyway.
It really is.
It's not a masterpiece like The Social Network is. I'm not going to watch it 150 billion goddamn times like The Social Network. But it's still a really good movie. So who's complaining? The only way I can complain is if a movie wins Best Picture and it just fucking sucks. I can't bring myself to fault a good movie for winning over something that's much greater. And that's just the way I am. So, with that out of the way, the movie itself, there's a lot of... The thing about it is, I wasn't around in 1979 when it came out. I still had 11 years to come around. But the thing is, wow, that makes me uncomfortable that I'm that close to 1979, because 1979 seems so far away. But, the thing about it is, I'm not sure how people took to it as far as what side you're supposed to take.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch the movie, I think, the times with 1979 and now are different, obviously. So it's really hard to gauge what side you were supposed to take, and the movie kind of makes that, problematic, because the opening of it is, the very opening shot is Meryl Streep, being very motherly to him, and, kissing him goodnight and doing all of that. And he's saying, he loves mommy and he'll see her tomorrow. And her plan is to close the bedroom door, pack up her bags, and leave for months. Because she cannot stand her marriage to Ted, who is Dustin Hoffman. So, the thing about it is, that's what the movie's broken down into 2 halves. The entire first half, the entire second half is what the movie builds itself up as. It's the courtroom part where they go against each other for custody. the entire first part that nobody really talks about or acknowledges is his building a relationship with the kid, because it's for 5.5 years of the kid's life. I'm pulling actual dialogue out of Meryl Streep's mouth to say that. She has been the mother to him, and now she's just gone. So he was never really that big of a player in raising him, according to Meryl Streep. That's the thing that I'll get into later. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the entire first half of the movie is watching their relationship progress and build and form into something, because for a while there, it's almost like he treats his son as just like a business partner, because that's just what he knows. That's all he's got. There's the scene where he tries horribly to make French toast and it doesn't go well. And then he goes to drop the kid off at school and walks him there. But instead of, walking him to school, he calls out the first adult there that he sees and says, hi, his, name is, and then take him, I gotta catch a taxi. And he runs off without even looking back and jumps into a taxi and goes to work. And he obviously, with the whole, not just in his character, but also in the setting he has been dropped into very suddenly, pretty much everything is frustrating. So that is not helping to build this relationship, because he can't help it. He was thrust into this situation and doesn't know what he's doing with himself. Naturally, he's going to get easily frustrated and blow up easily. And the kid is very small. And not used to seeing, once again, we don't really know what he's used to seeing, but I'll get to that. But then that's what's great about this first portion, is we get to see it build and build, and how it's, for the entire first portion there, it's basically like both of them are being left with strangers, even though they're a father and son that has lived together since he's been born. Streep was kind of the thing in between them, where she was kind of, everything to both of them individually, but they were apparently never really much of a combined family here. And of course, you have the cliche of he was more married to work than anything else. There's that. But as you see them get closer, as they are able to bond, because she's gone for like 8 months, and they have time to really, really build this. And we get that moment where it's really interesting, because there's not a whole lot of progression. There's just kind of the moment where it's still fresh, and then we fade out. And, we see him, wake Hoffman up, and then he goes to the bathroom, and then they make breakfast and all that, and we see it, and it's really hectic, but then there's a fade out, and then we fade back in, and this same routine is going down, but it's much more thought out and organized, and they've basically been doing the same thing for 8 months, and now it's like an actual routine with them, and it's the normal. And the kid is much more like, when he would get in trouble, he would say, I'm sorry, and put his tail between his legs and stuff like that. And when the 8 months pass, now he's like a brat, and has no trouble being outspoken about it. And, still wondering where mom is and stuff like that. And, there's the really great scene where he's at the playground, and he falls, and he, injures his eye, and he falls, off the top of the jungle gym while playing with a plane. And Hoffman has to physically pick him up and run him to the ER. And Hoffman has that great scene. It's worth noting, I didn't mention this when I was going through all its Oscar stuff, this was a really deserved Oscar win for Dustin Hoffman. A really, one I've never even, second-guessed. That was a fantastic year. He was up against Jack Lemmon for The China Syndrome, and Roy Scheider for All That Jazz. Two of my favorite performances ever. No problem whatsoever that Hoffman won this. I am perfectly okay with that. Pacino for Injustice for All was in there too, and Peter Sellers for being there. That's the 5. A great year for Best Actor, and while he wouldn't have been my personal choice, he's certainly a great one. There's no question at all. And there is a great scene where they say, it's apparently very simple. They're just going to take the kid in and say, we have to, do this to help fix his eye and stuff like that, and you can wait out here. You have to wait out here. And Hoffman just puts his foot down and said, that's my kid, and if you're going to do something to him, I'm going to be in the room to see what it is, and I'm going to be there to make sure everything goes right. And he's just kind of there with him through his little stitching, and it's this really, the bond has reached its peak. This is when they really, really have that father-son bond now. And apparently the chemistry with Dustin Hoffman and Justin Henry was really there too, because apparently, I would have never guessed this watching the movie, but I've read in many places that the scene where he talks about the ice cream that he went and got, but he has to finish eating first, and the build-up where he says, you're going to eat that, or you can't have the ice cream. And he gets a chair, he gets in the freezer, and he takes the ice cream out and brings it back to the table, and takes the bite really, really slowly, and he keeps saying, there's going to be a lot of trouble if you take that bite. Do not take the bite of that ice cream, or something's really going to be, we're going to really go off. Apparently that whole scene was improvised by the two of them. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, apparently there was even question, like, it wasn't like a right away thing that it was even going to be in the movie. Robert Benton had to actually say, that's good, we'll keep that. And it just happened to be this thing that they caught on camera. If I had to guess, I'd say that might be a little fabricated, and it may have happened on the set, and then they reshot it to make it look more, because it's very edited and well put together. But still, I don't doubt that at first the scene was completely improvised. Or maybe it was, maybe I'm totally wrong, I don't know. And then the second half of the movie happens. And I found this really, really interesting. I don't know what prompted me to look, but I guess I was just curious. It is exactly in the middle of the movie when Meryl Streep comes back. I hit the display button for the time on my DVD player when he went to meet her at the restaurant. And it was 52 minutes in, and there's 52 minutes left at that exact moment. And I don't know if that was intentional, but that's really cool. So it's absolutely, literally, the movie is in two parts. And obviously, once again, this was Streep's first Oscar also. That she does really, really earn. I can't remember off the top of my head who her competition was apart from Jane Alexander in the same movie. That's gonna bug me now. Oh shit. Okay, so, the mom from Breaking Away was one of them. But, anyway, this really great scene as well, where the scenes where Hoffman and Streep get to kind of fire at each other, are the really great scenes. And I love this moment where you can tell, apparently Streep was pissed off about it because it scared the holy shit out of her. But working with Dustin Hoffman has to be totally insane, because I love the stories that I heard. But there's this, but when she's saying, I want custody, even though I've been away for 8 months, I'm going to be his mother now, and there's nothing you can do about it. And she's getting him revved up. He just kind of says, okay, fine, whatever. And he gets up to leave. But there was a moment that Hoffman improvised where before he walked away from the table, he picks up a wine glass and breaks it against the wall right next to her head, and then walks away. And that's a really great moment. It's like Spacey throwing the asparagus in American Beauty. Apparently Streep was pissed off because she wasn't ready for it. Apparently the only person that knew was the cinematographer, because he went to him and said, make sure you got enough room to have that in the shot, because that's what I'm going to do. So, now the movie becomes kind of a difficult decision, because on paper, here's the weird thing. On paper, you see the setup and you see the concept and everything. It seems pretty clear that Streep is not exactly on the up and up in the situation, because, she has her story about how she raised him for 5.5 years while Hoffman didn't really do anything, and Hoffman, just drove her crazy enough to where she had to just leave, and even abandon him, and she has the whole story about how, it just would have been unfair for me to just take him wherever I was going because I didn't know where I was going, and all of this obby stuff. And there's nothing to suggest that she's the one in the right here, except that she keeps talking about her bad life with Hoffman. That's what I've been trying to get at, that I keep saying I'm going to come back to. Here I am, finally. The thing that's really, I don't know if it's bothersome or if it makes the movie more interesting. I really have not decided yet. This is a movie where you have to take everyone on their word. because all of the supposed bad stuff that happened in their marriage is something we never see and we never learn of a first-hand account on. We're taking everybody's word for it. So there's nothing to suggest that living with Hoffman's character was enough to make you want to leave for 8 months and abandon your kid. But we just have to take her word for it that that's how bad it was. And Jane Alexander's there as to kind of give us some insight on this, like saying, like, she was a very unhappy woman, and saying, like, when she's trying to convince her later and say, like, oh, he's a different person now. It's like, I wonder who that person before was. We know he was practically married to his job, and that seemed to be all he cared about, but that's pretty much it. I don't know that calls for 8 months of abandonment, especially to your child. But anyway, now that is what brings me to this scene, which I always find a bit weird, because, like I said, at this point, even if Hoffman was hard to live with, Streep still seems to be very much in the wrong in this situation. Yet, the moment where Streep returns in the park there, and obviously it's a triumphant moment for the kid because his mom's been gone for 8 months, and that's, all he's wanted, and there she is. Obviously he's going to run to her, and it's going to be triumphant for him. But with the music here, the music that plays as the kid is running, and the happiness on Streep's face, they make it like it's a triumphant moment for everybody except Hoffman. And like this big triumphant moment in the movie where mother and son are finally reunited. I thought that was a weird choice. I'm not quite sure. Like I said, if it's from the kid's perspective, I totally get it. But we're seeing it from the perspective of a spectator for this movie. And that's a weird way to approach that scene. Like, you can make the kid really, really happy, but maybe don't have the music in there. Or maybe, like, linger on Hoffman kind of watching this happen in a disapproving fashion or some shit like that. Making it, like, this big, triumphant, rocky moment. That was just really weird to me.
Yeah.
Because it's really not that happy of a moment. Because who knows, like, if she could the movie never really talks about this, but if her character could just leave like that for 8 months, who's to say she's not going to do it again?
It's true.
Hoffman was the one that, like, Hoffman could have just taken it to Jane Alexander and said, take this thing and run away. But they did the 8 months of bonding thing, and everything turned out great. So, yeah, but like I said, it's still weird, though, that we don't really see the side of the story that came before she left. We have no idea what Hoffman was like to live with, and we don't know if she was shady to begin with or not. We don't really know anything about them going in. We just have to kind of take their word for how they talk about each other, and it makes for a tough decision to make. But then, there's that moment where the good kind of starts to come out in both of them, because for a while there, it's more like a battle between them, and not just for the kid. But then they both start to have mercy on each other. Like, there's still a love there. Mm. Like, when the lawyer, questions her incessantly about boyfriends and how she jumps around and stuff like that. And when he goes back and sits down, Hoffman says, I think you may have been a little too hard on her, don't you think so? And then there's the moment where they bring up the accident on the playground to try to make Hoffman look bad. And then she comes to him afterwards and says, I seriously had no idea they were going to bring up the accident. That is not the direction I wanted that to go. And you can see that they both have mercy for each other, and it makes it difficult, whose side you want to take, because the reason Meryl Streep won an Oscar is probably for the scene where she takes the stand.
I'd say so.
Where she tells the really convincing story of why she had to do what she did. But at the same time, abandoning your kid for 8 months without notice, it's still something that lingers in your mind. Like, even in the most dire of circumstances, that seems pretty extreme and a little fucked up. So it's really hard to say. And it's so shrouded in mystery what Hoffman's characters like to live with. It would probably be a lot easier to understand the situation if we knew that, but we only know the first-hand accounts of Streep and Jane Alexander, and those are pretty vague. So, it's hard to say. But with all that in mind, all that stuff does make the movie intriguing. Whether you want to say it's the movie's for the better or for the worse because of that stuff, that's really just your decision, I guess. But the movie works for me. It's a little frustrating that there are those pieces in there that we don't know that would make it easier to distinguish what we're supposed to be headed towards. But once again, maybe that's totally the point. So, yeah. But yeah, I do think the movie's perfectly fine, and the Oscar win has never really bothered me, so, yeah. The Squid and the Whale is a different story, but we're still in that same vein. It's set in 1986, and it's kind of Noah Baumbach's kind of autobiographical one. I'm assuming he's supposed to be Walt. I'm not positive, but
That sounds the most correct.
And through watching the movie kind of, also, even though everybody has their focus, Walt kind of seems to be the center piece, really, when you're looking at it. And it's set in 1986, and it's basically the story of what happens when Jeff Daniels and Laura Linney, who are two... Jeff Daniels is basically a has-been writer who can't really get another book off the ground, and Laura Linney is she basically took up writing after being inspired by being married to him, and she's just getting ready to take off and get published. And it's really just this big family of pretentious fucks.
Yeah.
Going through this divorce, this separation. And it's a lot more enjoyable than you think it is. I mean, just looking at it, it looks like the most indie of all indie movies. It's produced by Wes Anderson. Noah Baumbach actually approached Wes Anderson and begged him to direct it. But Anderson said, this is pretty personal. I think you should go ahead and do it. And it would have been a little hard to imagine this is a Wes Anderson movie. Because I don't know, yeah. When I think Wes Anderson movies, I think, a lot of colors and... kind of, an underlying dark themes amidst, a whole bunch of, happy shit and hilarity. The movie is really funny, but not necessarily in that way. The movie has a sense of humor to match its lead characters, for sure. And we have, like I was talking about, our main focus here is basically Jesse Eisenberg's character, pretty much. Who is basically forming himself to be a carbon copy of his dad. And before I go any farther, let me just say that he didn't get the farthest he got was a Golden Globe nomination, but in my personal opinion, Jeff Daniels should have won a fucking Oscar for this movie.
Yeah.
This is probably one of my favorite performances, Jeff Daniels in this movie. I love this character so much. Because he's he's just one of those characters where it's you can see your own dad in him, only 10 times with douchiness. Because Bernard Berkman is such this insufferable character. Pretty much every time, because he thinks he's such the ultimate intellectual, you can't... Every time something comes out of his mouth, pretty much every single time he speaks, you're really, really drawn to him, but you just want to strangle him and shut him the fuck up, too. Yeah. And Daniels plays this perfectly. And Walt is basically trying to make himself a carbon copy of Bernard. While Owen Klein's character, whose name just totally escaped, Frank, is not really trying to copy his mom, but he's more of the... You always have that, the older brother kind of goes towards the father, and the younger brother goes towards the mother, sort of thing. Yeah, this movie came out at just the right time to where I could, there was a lot in it I could eerily relate to at the time. So it was, yeah. So, we're just gonna skip past that.
And you showed it to me for the first time, too.
Yeah.
It's the first time I saw Jesse Eisenberg, as well.
And the intriguing thing about Walt's character that's really fun to watch is he basically sees himself as the same intellectual that Bernard sees himself as. And he is so far behind. He talks about all the... there's the moment where they're sitting at the dinner table and they're talking about, hey, we're reading A Tale of Two Cities and, English isn't any good. And he's like, oh, that's minor Dickens. You want Great Expectations or David Copperfield. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to read it then because it's not worth my time. And then there's that moment where he recommends The Metamorphosis by Kafka. And Walt doesn't read it, but he tells his girlfriend that he did to make himself sound intellectual. And I love that moment where he's kind of... I mean, she seems too kind of dense to realize it, but she's talking to him about it because she went and read it, and he still hasn't read it. And she's talking about the aspects of the book, and he's just like, oh, yes, it was very Kafkaesque. And she's like, well, yeah, because it was written by Kafka. It's like, it was very Kafkaesque, yeah.
That's a Wes Anderson sounding line right there.
And I just love how he's just this facade that repeats everything around him in hopes for greatness. Because when he's not, copying everything Bernard does and saying everything Bernard does, there's the big subplot where he performs Hey You at the talent show and tells everybody that he wrote it. And I guess back in 1986, the song wasn't as big. I guess that's why they chose that song for the plotline, if I had to guess. And then the great moment where the teacher's just playing it for the parents and just kind of with his arms folded. I always loved all that stuff. And then we have the introduction of the young girlfriend that is also a student of Bernard's, who is Anna Paquin. Some of her hottest.
Yeah.
And it's really, really disturbing because if you guys remember, I fucked up. in my notes I wrote Far and Away, but I'm talking about Fly Away Home.
That's great.
Good thing I caught myself. I don't know how many people still know, but when I was younger, there was a movie everybody loved called Fly Away Home, where Anna Paquin raises a bunch of geese, and her dad in the movie is Jeff Daniels. And there is a scene in this movie where they are making out, and Jeff Daniels has his hand up her shirt, and he says, "Put me in your mouth." It's like, fly away home. What happened? This is traumatizing. And going back, but yes, the thing that really drives you in about the movie is the movie has a really twisted sense of humor.
Yeah.
Apart from being a really fantastic representation of its subject matter. This is probably the best I've ever seen the subject matter handled, as of now. Spoiler of what I'm going to choose later. So anyway, continuing. Another thing, though, that goes on with the dark sense of humor is the character of Frank. I'm not sure if Noah Baumbach has, maybe a little brother like this, or maybe knew a kid like this. But despite the fact that it's kind of this comedy about divorce, that has a lot of serious themes in it, underlying, there were some really disturbing moments with Frank, the little brother. I'm almost positive the whole point is that Frank is a serial killer in the making. I mean,
yeah, I can see that.
I mean, his whole point is he has this little piece of paper that has this obscured image of nudity on it, I guess. We don't really get a good look at it. And his thing is to go into the back of the library and set it on one of the shelves and basically hump the bookshelf until, and then he removes it from his pants and wipes it all over the books. And then there's a second moment where he gets caught doing it. And because I guess this became a regular thing, not just these two moments. Where we don't go into it, but I'm guessing it's supposed to be a girl that he likes. Because he goes over to a locker and he kisses it, and then walks away.
Oh God! Yeah.
And then there are moments where he's looking in the mirror and talking I don't know who he's supposed to be imitating, but to me it sounded like he's imitating the voice of somebody who's begging him to stop hurting them. This never goes anywhere either. Frank is just really fucking weird.
It's just stuck in the back of your mind the whole movie.
And we don't know what his problem is, but sometimes maybe kids are just weird and they grow up fine. Frank is really fucking weird.
He's probably killed at least one person.
I don't know what we're supposed to do with that, but
That's by design, if I had to guess.
We're supposed to assume, I guess, it's the way he's dealing with the divorce.
Yeah, some people deal with it different ways.
He'll grow out of it once things become normal.
Mm.
I guess, but some of those scenes are really fucked up.
True.
So, yes. Now, the thing that I really love here, much like Kramer versus Kramer, this is when they really kind of collide here, is how it becomes a battle between Jeff Daniels and Laura Linney's characters. Because it's not just them saying, they immediately, right away, there's no question about it, joint custody. There's no question about that. And they switch off each day. Like usually, with my scenario, it's, weekdays and then weekends, but this is they're switching back and forth literally every day.
Mine was the weekends for me, too.
And to even things out, every other Thursday, too.
Yeah, never had that before.
So that's the way Bernard was. He was really, really, this is my day, And that's what I'm talking about, is when he talks about it being his day, it seems less, there's no question that Bernard, loves his children and everything. But when he gets really specific about the days and when he's with his kids, it's clearly a battle with Laura Linney's character. And that's really what it boils down to. And then, every time, it happens 2 or 3 times, whenever they ask, what's the big deal with the days? And his response is just, he loves them and he wants to see them. But every time he says it that way, there's really no love or passion in it. It's just kind of well, I'm your dad, this is what I'm supposed to say, but really, I just want you, because that means Laura Linney doesn't have you.
I'm going to spoil you incessantly.
So, it's really, and then, his character is not just like that, particularly in the scene. This is the brilliance of Daniels' performance. You can tell, he really likes spending time with Walt, and he likes playing ping pong with Frank, and there's the moment at the end there where Bernard has the chance to really show a human side, but Bernard will always be Bernard. So he's talking about everything with Walt while he's laying in the hospital bed, and totally out of character, Walt just starts to break down and cry, and Bernard doesn't know how to deal with it, so he just kind of keeps saying things that he thinks will make it better, we can just do this. We can do this too. We can do whatever. It doesn't matter. We can do whatever. Just stop being emotional.
It's panic mode, basically.
But he never steps out of that character, because that character, the character of Bernard he's made in concrete now. This is a person that will not change, which probably had a lot to do with why their marriage didn't work. And it's one of those cases where the love is still there, between them, when he's at her door and they're talking and she's saying, I talked to your dad on the phone the other day, and then he says, yeah, he called me afterwards and said that he thought I could save my marriage. And there's that moment between them where they're not really saying much, but it's almost for a split second, just a split second, they believe that that's actually true.
Yeah. But
then he leaves and she starts to cry because she kind of half wants it to happen, but also knows. Very doubtful. Yeah. And of course he's been out to get her since this started because she's been having affairs. So there's that. Which brings in Billy Baldwin's character, who I love. He's so good. He doesn't get a lot of scenes and he doesn't really have to do much, but his presence here, he just makes it work. And I really love that character. All he has to pretty much do is say, hey, what's up, brother? But it's just a full character in itself.
It's good enough for him, though.
Yeah, it's great. And also Frank kind of, when Walt is also becoming Bernard more and more every day, Frank also kind of wants to become Ivan a bit. When Bernard has to tell him what a Philistine is, and he's like, well, Ivan's a Philistine, and I want to be a Philistine. He's like, oh, no, you like the wild child when we saw you're not a Philistine. It's no, you're definitely not a Philistine. Stop saying that. And there's always, the questionable things where, obviously, there's always the battle where she's getting published and he's becoming into has-been territory. So it's really just an ongoing battle between the two of them. It almost has nothing to do with the custody of the kids at all. And Laura Linney even brings up at the end the really questionable thing where she screams at him, the only reason you agree to joint custody is because that's less child support you have to pay. And he doesn't have a response to that. So
that's a red flag right there.
It's really, but that's the thing, just all the characters in this movie are so complex because, once again, Laura Linney's character had a whole bunch of affairs during her marriage, but you can still tell she's a really loving character. So everybody's really, really complex. Like, and Walt's character where, you know he's just a big fake, but you know he's sincere in wanting to be something, and that's why he does what he does. So yes, it's also worth noting real quick, I got the pleasure of seeing Blue Velvet in a theater last September, and I could not stop thinking about the scene in this movie where they play with the fact that it's set in 1986, and Walt invites Bernard to the movie that he's gonna go see with his girlfriend. It's like a first date movie, and he says, "Hey, you want to go to the movie with us? We were thinking of seeing Short Circuit," and he's like, "Really? Because I heard Blue Velvet's supposed to be pretty interesting." And it's the three of them in a crowded theater with Blue Velvet just watching. It's the scene where Laura Dern's doing the big cry face and Isabella Rossellini is saying, like, he was inside. I love that little piece of humor. Though I looked it up, and Short Circuit and Blue Velvet were not out at the same time, so it kind of ruins the joke a little bit. But it's still fine, though, because I love the contrast of, we were thinking of seeing Short Circuit.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't get to go to that showing.
So yes, so as I was saying, I think the subject matter has not been handled any better than it was handled in The Squid and the Whale, and you can tell that it's a really, really personal touch that was put into this movie. And I think it's borderline masterful. I know I say that about pretty much every movie that wins in the verses, but that's because we do all the movies I really love.
Yeah.
And Squid and the Whale, once again, I've said a lot, but it's true, it has always been a favorite.
Same.
So yes, this was no contest, of course,
no.
for the Squid and the Whale, but yes, they both do what they do really well, which is another line I think I end almost every video with.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes, that's that here.
So next week, as long as everything lines up, your cryptic comment is showtime. And if not,
the question is, what's it with? And you'd probably have to be an idiot to not figure that one out.
Yes. I'll give you a little backstory real quick before we end. There is a big versus coming very soon, as you know. Yeah, as you're preparing for.
No idea how this is going to happen, but
we'll work it out. There is a bigger there is actually a versus battle that's going to be really entertaining. That's coming up at the beginning of May.
Potentially, if it doesn't have to be bummed because of working things out, but we'll figure that out.
We'll see what happens with that.
Because that's less than a month now.
Yeah, I know it is. It feels great, doesn't it?
Okay.
So, that being said, I thank you guys and girls out there for watching. Stay tuned to watch wrestling content on Pop, as well as Sip and Snack, and next week to AJ's movie reviews, Gaming with Ash, and Versus. So, that being said, thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?
That's it.